Welcome to the Rose Show podcast. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. I have the utmost pleasure of being here with an amazing woman. She's a woman leader in business and finance and economics. Neely Tamminga, CEO and co-founder of Distill Advisory, advisors for CEOs and boards about consumer behavior. You are a consumer economist or an economic data nutritionist. In January 23, you were named in the experts category as a top retail influencer by Rethink Retail, sponsored by Microsoft. Also in January 22. In 2021, you received a leadership award issued by Women in the Housing and Real Estate Ecosystem. So many awards. You are a professor, a board director, a TEDx speaker, and I have to say that was a really great show on consumers. A mom and a wife. Thank you so much for joining us, Neely, in your very busy schedule. We appreciate it. Now let's all find some joy as Neely extracts clarity from a complex world. Neely, how did this all begin? Were you always an econ nerd?
Yes. Rosanna, thank you. And those very kind words. The answer is yes. Was I always kind of the last girl picked in gym class? Yes. Did I hang out and infinitely prefer, I think you and I have this in common. Did I prefer playing like Star Wars and Transformers right out on the playground field with the guys? Yes, I did. So I think in hindsight, when I look back at some of my stories, I'm like, oh, okay. In fact, I have this, I don't know if I've ever told the story like in a podcast or what have you. So here you go. Here's here's an interesting little story. So I remember it was high school math. I think it was pre-calc or something to that effect. We had to hand in our work notebooks, and my teacher then had called me and said, hey, could you stay after class for a second? And I said, oh, okay, sure. So I stay after class, and he's like, he flips to the back of my notebook and he says, what are you doing here? And I said, oh, I'm just making patterns. And I just made number sequences for fun. Like, is that not normal? Is that not common? But I would just do that for fun. I would just try to make various different number sequences and patterns and logic behind it. And he's like, I think we need to bring you to a couple other places. And from there, I was introduced into, I met some female scientists and mathematicians while I was in high school, because really a teacher saw that maybe I needed a different sort of stimulus, than I was getting just in class. So in hindsight, I think I was always into pattern recognition in numbers, and it didn't challenge me. It actually enthralled me and in some ways calmed me. So I guess that's where it all started. But you have similar stories too, I think.
Absolutely. I do grid puzzles on Sundays, those grids, and I do math problems, logic puzzles. I love it. And it's actually very soothing and calming. And my husband always catches me doing that. And so, yes, very similar. And we just found out we are born within a week of each other. So it's pretty exciting and awesome. So happy.
Math twins, math nerds, activate.
Absolutely. And I was one of the few math girls in my class. And I was always accelerated math. I think I did, I did calculus, all that in high school, and loved it. So it's exciting stuff. So, okay, everyone. Neely calls herself an econ nerd. I'm not making fun of her. I just want to clear that up in case anyone thinks I'm calling you a nerd. It was challenging for me, I know, to be the only female in math and always wanting to hang out with the boy activities. I mean, we're not, we grew up in a different time period than now. So what were some challenges that you faced along the way through your path in math and economics?
It's so interesting that you say that. The numbers in science really were never a problem for me. In fact, as we joked, I found some calming aspects to it. I found belonging actually in numbers. Socially, I think I struggled. I had actually skipped the 7th grade. My parents were seeing a pattern in me that I was not being challenged in some way. So if you can, now in hindsight, I look back and I'm like, wow, that was pretty dodgy, you know, for mom and dad to kind of take a 6th grader and essentially move her to 8th grade and doing 9th grade math at that point. And that definitely branded me as an outsider. You know, socially, I had more friends that were teachers for about a year or so. But in hindsight, I don't regret that, because I think, you know, obviously getting really focused on your studies is a good thing as well. No long-term damage. It all turned out okay, right? The girl's fine. Like I'm just fine. Everything turned out a-okay. But I guess I'm really good at number recognition, but maybe social cue recognition I probably lack from time to time.
You are so social to me. I think you're awesome. You're social.
But it worked out okay. It worked out okay. So if you're like, the question is, you know, where did I struggle? It wasn't academically. I think it was understanding what was my voice while also navigating kind of awkward social circumstances, you know, in that time frame, and what did belonging look like socially when it felt very comfortable academically. I don't know. Maybe did you have a similar?
Yes, socially, absolutely. I did not relate to others, especially the females, and because they were more into different activities, and I didn't find the same activities exciting or fun. So I had a lot of male friends, and then it was still awkward because, you know, when you're 13, 14, you know, the boys don't really want to be your friend. And I spent a lot of time alone, and I'm an only child as well. So, you know, and then I ended up having my parents' friends be my friends. So when they would come over, I would enjoy talking to them more. And then I would walk, you know, ride my bike in the neighborhood. I ended up talking to mature women, retired women, actually. And so I had older friends that I could relate to. So yes, socially, absolutely, was a challenge for me as well.
But look, we found each other.
Exactly.
Eventually.
I'm so happy we did. And you are
the playground
awesome.
is called Twitter.
Yes, exactly. We found each other. I agree. I love this. So awesome. You know, I like to know, did you at some point have these challenges? How did you overcome them? Did you just keep focused on what your goals and your passions were? And were you able to keep that focus, or did these feeling a little, you know, socially awkward in some way, did that affect you and bring you down?
It's such a great question. I was raised by very supportive parents. My younger sister, who is just vastly different than I am, has always been a great emotional support for me as well. And what's so interesting, I didn't think about this till you asked this question. You're so good at these interviews, Rosanna.
I just go with my feelings.
I'm like, wait a second, this is like therapy session, I think. My first job was on Wall Street at 16. So my dad was a senior officer at A.G. Edwards and Sons, which eventually got rolled up to Wachovia and then eventually went to Wells Fargo. That's kind of how the roll-ups situation went. And he was in the, you know, top senior executive sort of level of things, and kind of has his own interesting kind of career and how he was navigating things there. But he was very beloved in that organization, wickedly bright, and was kind of like a tech consultant before tech consultants really existed. I mean, he built the whole trading floor for them. You know, they would get some sort of outside consultant who would bid some sort of, I don't know, $2 million in 2 years. And he's like, I can do it for 500,000 in 6 months. You know, I mean, he was that sort of entrepreneurial within a corporate environment. So it made him very valuable and very popular because he was skillful as well as a delight, you know, and a really hard worker. And so he elevated, and come my 16th year, when I was 16 years old, my first job was to work essentially in the dividend cage and help the corporate, you know, there's a cash window where people could like cash their checks before direct deposit existed, right? And myself and another officer's daughter basically work the cash window over the summer months. And, to this day, it's just this funny thing, because when you're called A.G. Edwards and Sons, nepotism will exist, and you will hire their daughters too.
I
So,
love it.
I mean, I guess in hindsight, that's how I dealt with it, as I just started working.
I love it. That's awesome. And you had such a supportive family, and Wall Street at 16. Wow. I have to say, Neely, okay, you are so humble. This is an amazing story. This is truly amazing. I love it. This is so awesome. So let's fast forward to today. And actually, maybe a little before today. You began Distill, I think, in 2017.
We did.
And that's from memory. I remember reading that. I was like, wow. So what did you do up until Distill, and how did you come up with that idea? What made you decide to go in that direction with Distill Advisory?
Great question. And not too dissimilar from the journey of being 16-year-old and working the cash window, I think. The first job out of college that I had the privilege of joining was the research department, the equity research department at A.G. Edwards, mainly because it was the only department I was able to work in that didn't have a nepotistic ties. So it was like down to like banking or research, like choose one of those two. Research, and I had been told by, some of the executives at the firm, who of course invested in me because of my dad and what have you. They were like, oh, you'd be really good at research. I kept on being told that you'd be really good at research. So I was like, well, let's start at research. So first job out of college was in research, equity research. And it was like love at first sight. It made so much sense to me, everything that we got to do. So I was essentially sell side analyst, and on that trajectory went from A.G. Edwards recruited out of A.G. Edwards to Piper Jaffray in 2002. So after my first 6 years at A.G. Edwards, moved up to Minnesota through Piper Jaffray, and had a really amazing and phenomenal career there. And that was bittersweet to leave, right? The place that had made me, but it was a delight. And I had an opportunity to work with a phenomenal senior analyst who was definitely kind of on the rise there. And he covered the consumer sector. And it was just a beautiful and blessed nearly 15 years at Piper, where I had the opportunity to be the original co-author with that senior analyst on something called Taking Stock with Teens Survey Project, which is still in existence. It's every 6 months, 10,000 teens, asking them about their consumer behavior. It's used in pretty much almost every CPG C-suite at this point, because it's the longest longitudinal study on teen research behavior, spending behavior. And so, had opportunities to really deep dive and understand consumer behavior, and just loved it. Loved the business, loved learning, loved everything about it. But there comes times where you're like, is this going to be like this for the next 20 years? Is this it? And we were getting invited by me and my now co-founder, Kayla, who I worked together at Piper Jaffray, which is now called Piper Sandler, but back then it was Piper Jaffray. And we were getting invited into more and more boardrooms for some of our big picture white paper sort of research we were doing on consumer behavior around untethered mobile commerce, because we were answering questions that they were having in the boardroom that others on the sell side really weren't asking or addressing. And so it stood out to them. And that was our first really big aha, that boards truly need to bridge the gaps that exist in just education. You can't have the same, 10 board members that look the same, right? It's tacit collusion. You can't have sitting board directors, that of the same industry, that know kind of the pressures of being a CEO. You can't have 6 of those CEOs sitting on a board. It's tacit collusion. So they have to pull from other industries or adjacent industries, or possibly they're retired or what have you. Every single time you go, 1 degree away from a sitting CEO in that industry, you're going to have a gap in education, whether it's what's the latest technology, or what's the actual demands currently on CEOs and sitting CEOs. And even if you have another sitting CEO, which is rare to actually have another active sitting CEO on that board, sometimes you have a lot of retirees, but not active sitting CEO. They're time starved. And so they don't really have a ton of time to get up to speed on all the complexities that are facing that company that they serve on that board. So there's always these natural gaps in education. We saw that firsthand by being invited in on these boardroom conversations. And that was the first spark to what is now Distill Advisory.
Love it. Love the story, the entrepreneurial spirit. It's just amazing. You saw the inefficiencies or ineffectiveness, something that was missing in the system, and you disrupted it. You created Distill Advisory, bringing all this data to the CEOs, the boards. And how has it been since 2017? Are you loving it? You seem very passionate about it.
We do. We truly love the opportunity to come in and help build trust. During what is usually, when we're getting phone calls, it's because something's usually not working well, or there's a confusion. There was actually, I'll never forget, there was a 48-hour period in our last pre-pandemic, I'll just say it that way, pre-pandemic, I won't pinpoint it. We received 3 out of left field inbound calls through our network. Because, everybody who was calling us knows a friend of a friend or knows us directly. It's all referral, based or directly known. We don't cold call, we don't outbound, it's all kind of inbound when they need you. But there was like a 48-hour period when we had 3 inbound requests, and they were all sounding similar, like, hey, could you get our board conversation in 3 or 4 weeks? Hey, could you? And I was like, what happened to consumption behavior over the last weekend that is causing these 3 companies to call me? So, but that is, we're usually being called when things are a little tense and confused. And that's where we shine. We love accessing everyone's expertise in the room. We do not have the answers, but we do have usually a framework that can help unlock some answers of people within the room. And it's just with a little bit of better information that usually leads to better decision making. And that's our joy. That truly is our joy, to help them come to better decisions.
I love it. It's exactly, having my background in decision sciences. We don't have the answers. It's about asking the right questions. And through the questions, we're able to continue thinking and tweaking and going along. And mistakes are part of the process. It's part of the growth. And I love how you say that. You speak like a true professional, I have to say. You don't have the answers. And that's part of the process. We don't have the answers. And when we think we have the answers, we're usually incorrect. I think, it's part of just going with it and just keep questioning and keep just, moving forward, and just knowing that we don't have the answers. So I love that. I love the way you speak. So brilliant. You're so brilliant. You're so awesome. Okay. So let's go to, I want you to give us some clarity about macro and data. So
you're like, now that you don't have the answers, I want the answers.
I know, right? I want some questions. We're going to dig off questions, and maybe we'll get some clarity here from you. So we all know that the headlines are just to get our attention. We need to look under the hood. So now I'm starting to cough. So as a consumer behavior expert, Neely, give us some clarity, please. What is the consumer doing? What are they up to these days? And where do you see the consumer's behavior headed this year, 2023, and beyond?
Do you want my first question?
Sure. Yes, please. Give us questions. What are you wondering? What do you think?
Are you ready?
About? Yes.
Which consumer? You're like, touche.
The average one. The average one.
Who's average? Okay.
I don't know. Okay. So is it based on age?
All right, we'll help unpack
Or
this.
gender.
I just had to lead with that question. It's one of my
Oh
favorite
gosh,
questions.
you are
It's one of my favorite questions. So it truly it depends. And here's a couple of things to keep in mind. I mean, I do not want to go back to a global shutdown, pandemic, and what have
Oh,
you, but 2020 was hands down the easiest year we ever had about predicting consumer behavior. Like that, that was
they were going to stay home and shop.
Yeah, hand them, trillions of dollars of direct stimulus payment, tell them they can't leave. Like that's an easy call. Okay, that was like a very easy call about how consumers were going to behave. And then, reopening and watching how people reopened and watching some of the federal pandemic unemployment compensation incentive alignment around labor, vaccination rates. I mean, it was not terribly difficult to predict 2021 either. 2022 was pretty hard, actually. The broad strokes were that we were, and this was kind of the easier side of the call, but you're starting to rotate, you're over indexing from goods and back into services, right? Travel being front and forward, right, to the conversation over the summer. Those were some reasonably easier, predictions to make about consumer behavior. Heading into 2023, girl, this is going to be the hardest year I think we've ever had in predicting consumer behavior, because it really depends not only on which consumer you're referring to, but which income demographic, what psychographic is going on, what's going on in terms of their life choices. All consumer behavior begins with an economic reality, and it factors in a life stage priority. When that life stage priority was like, I just need toilet paper, right? And safety, that was easy. And here's my, capacity to spend. It was just direct stimulus payments. Now it's around millennials just bought millions of houses, millions of cars, upgraded millions of jobs. We saw huge wedding year, by the way, in 2022. Engagements were through the roof in 21. Huge wedding year in 2022. Are we going to start seeing more babies? That's something that we are currently positing out there. Tons of negativity against that call. There's a lot of people who are like, yeah, no, birth rates are going to be horrible forever. We're a little bit in the other camp thinking, well, I don't know. First comes love, then comes marriage, then comes baby in the baby carriage. So, we're actually a little more optimistic on that. But why this matters, why we even go down this path of looking at this, economic reality and life stage priority, is because the day you sign the mortgage on your house, all of your spending priorities change, right? You're not traveling out around the world, eating avocado toast and, vacationing in Bali. That's not going to happen anymore. The day and the moment that child comes home for your first child, as you know, 3 times over, and as I know, 1 time over, every single spending priority changes overnight.
Absolutely.
So it's what every company believes or investor might believe around, well, millennials behave this way. We got to rethink all of that the day that they have these major life stage priority changes. And we do think that household formation and baby making is going to be one of those that we kind of need to rethink. And that's what we're watching for very closely in some of the signs in 2023.
Perfect. Love it. Neely's prediction, babies are coming this year. So I think we go all in on any baby related stock, right?
That's your call, not my call, but
I love it. That's, when you eliminate the choices and all you have is stimulus money, and you're locked in your home and you have internet and a computer, shopping online, and just, the basic needs are really what you're focused on. And then once you're let out of your cage and we were unlocked and we were allowed to travel, I guess people just utilize services. So we went from, good society for that year, and then we switched to mainly service, all these services that we utilize, restaurants. I mean, in Manhattan here, I mean, it was so busy when the opening happened. I mean, you couldn't even get anywhere. I mean, it was like everyone was out and about. No one wanted to be home at all. So all the restaurants were busy and, you know, everything. So it was all service. So, yeah, interesting points that you make regarding choices. So for 2023 could be the year of the baby. And so what other things are you thinking about regarding the consumer? I guess depends on which consumer we're talking about. You made, I want to preface that with your tweet that you mentioned. I love all your data. It's fantastic. And the points that you make. You said student loan forbearance is ending. The EIDL loan is in repayment. That's the economic disaster one. Credit card debt is rising. We know there's a higher cost on that debt as rates are rising. We have 17 million people that need health insurance come May. And then we have business loans are set to resume and so forth. So with all this in mind, is this going to reduce this consumption and cause some of these people to go back into the labor force?
We think it's entirely possible that that is one of the outcomes. And all of those are kind of converging in a very tight sequence. I think that's the other thing that it's not just that they're happening, it's when they happen and how tightly they might happen to the economy that has us in team uncertainty. We fully acknowledge the consumer has been, optically resilient through the last couple of years. And there's something to be said around kind of that learned resiliency. However, it's around looking around the corner. It's not about resting on what is right now. That is our job as we advise CEOs and boards about consumer behavior, right? All through this economic lens. In one, there are a couple things that we have very top of mind. First and foremost, the student loan forbearance being lifted, potentially, very likely, it's in the hands of the Supreme Court. They're listening to arguments. They're deciding it essentially this spring. It's very likely they'll deploy their announcement and their views on whether or not the lower court was right in holding up the unconstitutionality of the application of the HEROES Act to this loan forgiveness plan. If that's the case, we might have student loans go back into repayment. It's not terribly transparent data, but we're estimating close to 40 million people in total would be potentially having to go back into repayment as early as late July to August. That is a pretty significant event. I mean, like a very significant event to the consumer's capacity to spend, for sure, right? That's fewer dollars that would have to be spent on things you want in order to have to spend on the bills that you have to pay. But that other component, that proclivity to spend, the willingness to spend, the wantingness to spend, that's what really sits in the back of our mind, Rosanna, because the consumer does not spend when they're angry or afraid. We can document that. We can case study that. Emotions do matter. They will spend weirdly when they're sad. They will spend when they're happy. Anger, afraid. I mean, you can mark that item 70% off and they will not have it. So that's the part, that's the scar tissue from being a consumer professional paid observer of consumer behavior in Wall Street for 2 decades. That's what's sitting in the back of our mind as that student loan forbearance gets lifted and we have the potential of going back into full repayment.
Love that. That makes a lot of sense. I guess there's fear entering these consumers because they see all these bills are coming due. And I guess, yeah, and they could be angry as well. During COVID, there was a lot of fear, but at the same time, they were getting a lot of money. Money was coming their way. So that would overcome their fear as they were getting stimulus money. So great points that you make there. Now, we have inflation. In my opinion, high inflation is here to stay a little longer than most people and the market believes. I don't think we're going to have this 2.5 or 2% return anytime soon. That's my opinion. I think we're going to stay at a higher level. Services are very sticky, and services are a function of employment and labor. We have a very strong labor market. As we see, the unemployment rate is now at a new low since I think it's 1969 or something, and we're at 3.4%. You know the data, and that's a headline number. There's plenty of other data, employment data out there. There's the Beveridge curve, the fill rate, NFP. There's all these other data. When you look at the data and you compare it and you contrast it with what you're seeing with this consumption being pulled back because of all this fear, do you think that the strong labor market will clear itself up? Or do you think it's still a challenge? The strong labor market will continue?
That's a very good question. I think it is lagging. I mean, it's empirically lagging whenever, by the time the damage is done, right? That's when you start to see the flushing out of the labor market. But let's just put this is for you just as it is for me, because as you run businesses, and we not only advise on the economy, we actually have investments in small businesses as well. And I'm just putting my CFO hat on right now. I mean, you manage to budget, you manage to dollars, you don't manage to rate, and you kind of don't manage the headcount either, right? I mean, you've got targets of what you need to do, and you care about your people. You want to keep your people. If you need to keep your people, no doubt. But this is where you and I are like not only birthday twins, right? But we are so aligned on this single word for 2023, and that word is efficiency.
I love it. Efficiency. That's my next part. You stole it. Yeah, right? I love it. Mean, it is streamlining operations. That's key. That's all we've been doing actually since the end of 21. But yes, but I have so much to say about it.
Right. And I want to hear what you have to say about it.
I'm so excited.
Because this is missing from a lot of, the FinTwit, sort of rhetoric, is the reality of managing businesses. And they're, corporate, we say this all the time, corporations are people, people are patterns, patterns are triggered by brain chemicals. Okay. And the reaction, the self-protection brain chemical is high, especially to a CFO and to a CEO who has to maintain the greater good of their company's economy and think through kind of that efficiency and streamlining and task flow improvement, what have you. So I think what's going on, when I just zoom out, kind of like a pointillism, painting, you zoom in, you see something very differently, and then you zoom out, you see a bigger picture. When I zoom out, what I see is a lot of careful, to your point, what you guys are doing, streamlining, task flow automation. I mean, think about this chat GBT. It will replace people. It will replace services. It will replace people. The reason why people are spending millions and millions and millions, right, in this isn't because it's a novelty. It's because it will solve and streamline things that took, oh, by the way, longer, not just by people, but by time. I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm backed up on my emails by about a week at any given week.
I've been so bad. I don't even get back to people sometimes. They're like, didn't you get my email? It's like, and I say, I think it went to spam. I feel so bad. And then I see, I didn't open it.
Right. And so I would probably pay good money for something to just automatically respond and schedule something beyond just Calendly or whatever, So
yeah.
Tell me about what you guys are seeing, because I think this is such a great conversation around efficiency.
I love it. I love talking business, and I love it's so funny how we can share with each other, and we can learn so much from each other. I'm on the ground floor. I've been a CFO for so many years, and now I'm CEO, because I basically just make the decisions for the company. I mean, that's what I do. I'm a decision maker. I'm an executor. Always been. I just love it, and so and I'm always learning. It's about having greater accuracy in our judgment to have a greater expected value with our choices. So, it's, you always strive for the best, but you always have to do what's good enough. And otherwise you're going to be making decisions. You're going to be sitting there with a decision all day long. So efficiency is key. I love Neely. You're awesome. I gotta tell you, everyone, I love Neely. Okay.
I love Rosanna.
Okay. You're of efficiency. You're so brilliant. Oh my God, I love brilliant women like you. And you're my twin. We're same week birthday. I'm honored to say that. Okay. It absolutely is years of efficiency, I think. And we lived through our business. We were in the .com. We had other businesses back then. And so we experienced it. We made money, we lost money, and you learn through those experiences, wisdom that comes with age. We had this business, we started in 2006, the year our first son was born, or just like yours, your son was born. And we had challenges. 2007 came, 2008. And we all know what happened then. Based on our experiences from 2000, we really were very savvy, and we remained very lean with our books and records and our finances. And so we were able to diversify, and we went international with our company. And our company did really well during that time period. Because we sold internationally. We had I think 70 to 80%. We sold to Australia. We had so many orders for our manufacturing business that were foreign. And during that time period, we saw our competitors, quite a few folded. And so we gained market share. We vertically and horizontally integrated. We streamlined. We took those challenging times of 2008 and we turned them into opportunities. And it was risky, of course, but there's no reward gain without taking risk. And so we streamlined, we integrated, we grew, we went into other industries, and we became where we are today. And we saw similarities to that time period at the end of 21. I think it was just like human nature, was like intuition, that we said, all this money, all this free money, rates are at zero, went towards riskier assets. There's going to be a backlash. There's going to be some pullback. And we saw with our business shifting at the end of 21. And so we just said, you know what, we're paying off any debts our company had. And we have some long-term debt, like really long-term. But besides that, we've gotten rid of all of our short-term debt and everything, and we got to raise our cash, and we got to really remain lean and streamline. So we saw a reduction in productivity. The worker is never going to be the same since COVID. Okay. They were spoiled and they had money. They were able to stay home. They had all these benefits, higher pay, and the workers changed. So I'm seeing that as the packaging worker was getting more than ever. And so just to get them to come to work, you had to pay them more. And so there's higher labor costs, not only with the actual payment of the wages, but it's new fees. And living in New York and having our business here, we had the IIS surcharge because that was the enhanced benefits, and New York depleted their funds, so they borrowed from the federal government. So we're still paying that fee. It's a new fee. We have so many new fees. My husband's the one who he's the attorney. And so he deals with all the compliance and taxes. He's a tax attorney as well. So he sees all that worker comp and all that stuff. And he's just like, there's just so many new fees. So that's all elevated, higher cost of goods sold, higher operating expenses, margins are compressed. And being a CFO for so many years, I think in, financial statements. So I'm just saying it's a dilution of value. Productivity's down. So what have we done? We've implemented autonomous equipment, and it's worked well. Research has shown that productivity being down, AI, autonomous equipment in production, helps increase that productivity. So once again, challenges bring opportunities and they birth new industries. So we've been able to replace some of our workers that we were paying so much for, it seems, with some autonomous equipment. Not much, we're just starting to implement it now. We still have our same workforce. We've added actually some new workers, and we're growing, which is great. We take care of our workers. It's very important. I don't want turnover. Turnover is so expensive. And we had that. People don't, right? People don't realize how turnover expenses themselves. And there's like a mismatch of expectations from the employer and employee as well. And so there's a lot of issues going on in the labor market. But I have to tell you, New York being the epicenter of COVID, had maybe a little bit of a different effect. A lot of businesses closed. And, even though they had stimulus or PPP loans, it's really hard to be closed that long. And then coming back, it's just not the same. So a lot of businesses closed. Fortunately, we were able to remain an essential business. And so we were very creative, and we repurposed our equipment to make hand sanitizing equipment. And so we were essential. You can imagine how much needed that was. So we ended up, we didn't really sell any of it, but it kept us open, and it was a really tough time here and during COVID. So we ended up doing is we used that equipment to make hand sanitizer, and we gave it out for free. And that was us giving back to our community. And, it cost us a lot, but it was just important to do, because there was a lot of price gouging, and there was no hand sanitizer in New York City area. So it was a nice thing, and we felt really good about that. So we did that kind of stuff, but I'm going off tangent now. Point is that turnover expenses are costly. There are a lot of expenses. There's a lot of issues going on. Efficiency is key. Streamlining operations, keeping the debt as low as possible, because there's a rise in the cost of debt and capital. And, there's just a dilution of value. We're getting less output for every input. And so we were fully aware of that. So last year as well, fortunately, our business is doing pretty well. Still, we're using the feedback loop. So we're making equipment based on what the customers' demands are, like the on-demand equipment. So, and you're just savvy, adaptable, innovative, and just always staying on top of things. And we will survive, and we'll be stronger and better in time. These are just challenging times, a lot of uncertainty. Agree completely.
Yeah, and I think, I think some people could fear the uncertainty. What I'm hearing you say, and certainly what we're trying to communicate, is use the uncertainty as a means to push through these efficiency conversations internally, so that we are prepared with the optionality to be able to press in when it's time to press in. And uncertainty doesn't mean you just sit on your duff and wonder and just wait, right? No, uncertainty means you are looking for ways to improve how you do this process, while you're also waiting to get confirmation signal on this, pull the trigger on this investment. And so I don't find it scary. I actually find it exhilarating.
I find it exciting.
And I think this probably goes back to the econ nerds and the two of us.
Exactly.
I think the two traits that actually, this is really the president of the college the university where I teach. He recently did a quick little post, and he said the two traits that something to the effect of, like, the two best traits you can have in a leader are wit and grit. And I think about that.
That's us.
It's are you funny? Can you bring some levity to the moment from time to kind of break people down, into we're all human and we're in this together. But do you have the critical thinking, right, to kind of keep moving forward? Because grit, in my mind, grit isn't grit without critical thinking. You need critical thinking to have grit.
Exactly. Agree completely. I love challenges. It's just like the logic puzzles and the math problems I do. Just like you do, I just have fun solving the problems. I mean, I've been a serial entrepreneur, I've never had a boss. And I just love the problem solving. I love the challenges, because through the challenges, it's that aha moment where you find that solution, and you just keep tweaking and you keep going and learning every day. I love that. It's exciting. And it's almost like my husband's like, you look for problems. I'm like, there's always something to be improved upon. There's always something. And it's through these times I find more exciting, because, all that free money and all that, when the market was running, and it wasn't even fun anymore. So it was just it was like an opportunity cost if you weren't in the market. But it got to some point where there weren't many opportunities. And Now the tightening of the belt, and there's going to be all these new opportunities to do so many things and to improve, because ultimately that's the human, we're all creators and we all going to keep improving, and everything gets better. And it's through these tough times that we become better. We adapt and things get more efficient, and and it's healthier, it's important. We shouldn't be wasteful. So I think it's good. I'm in I was actually a commercial real estate broker. I have my own brokerage in Seattle. We've lived all over. We moved around. We were travelers. And so in downtown Seattle, I had a commercial real estate brokerage I started it, in 2004. And I was in commercial real estate. I loved it. Financial analysis of buildings, of course, and businesses and leases and negotiation. That's another thing I love doing, negotiation and industrial. I did all that stuff. And then 2007, 2008 hit. And I have to tell you, I don't want to sound bad, but I was sort of happy. I was there were too many people in the space. Everyone had their license. And it was it brought such a poor service, because they weren't even really that experienced, or they didn't even take the time to learn. They just jumped right in. There's so many mortgage brokers, and I was I wanted the quality to increase, because I just like you, I work really hard and I come prepared, and I want to be my best, and I want to provide value. And so when it happened, it sort of brought value back to the real estate. And I feel the same way with the stocks and the trading. Now it's the strongest, the savviest survive. So everyone's working to be their best. So it brings back that quality. It's not just everyone doing it. There's more quality, and then you have efficiency as well. But yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Agreed.
Oh, I love it.
Birthday twins, econ
yes, we are.
twins,
I'm so proud.
math twins,
I love it.
efficiency nerds.
I'm going to send you a birthday shout out on Twitter. February 12th, Lincoln's Day. It's Neely's Day. Neely's Day.
Good birthday to have.
Absolutely. February is the best. As margins continue to compress, business profitability is down, lower output and volume. And I always say inflation works both ways. It also elevates the revenues, and, it's increased prices. So what are your thoughts on inflation? And, I know, all about the CPI recalibration. I don't know if it's going to bring down inflation that much. But what are your thoughts regarding that and inflation into this year and next? What are your thoughts on that based on your data analysis?
Such great questions.
Thank you.
Again, a simple girl who, helps out other companies and businesses. We're still seeing price increases coming through from suppliers and vendors. And so it's hard for us to believe that the inflation problem has all of a sudden been solved, when the vendors themselves are still, kind of pushing through their price increases. And so I think I'm in your camp. I think it's going to remain elevated longer. Will it kind of settle from spiky down to another sort of level? Sure. Do we hang out somewhere in that 4 to 5 sort of percent area, throughout the year?
That's what I was thinking. That range.
Yeah, right. Okay. Right. Okay. Are we happy with that? It's fine as long as people are employed. But if that demand curve starts to fall down a lot faster, and CFOs are managing to dollars on their labor pool and not rate or head count, then we're going to have a problem with layoffs, and that that should be some of the potential effects down the road. Does that happen right away? No. But that's why we are watching, yes, inflation. We do think labor is probably more the story, but what's fueling that labor story is that consumer demand piece, which is why we're looking at things like what happens when 40 million people have to go back and pay their student loans. or what happens when the pandemic emergency officially ends and the 17 million people that were on did not that actually hopped on to Medicaid, through the provisions out of the pandemic provisions, basically, right? The transfer payments that they had allowed that. There were 17 million people who were added to the Medicaid rolls that were able to access healthcare in a free or very near free sort of way. They're going to have to find health insurance, a big portion of them, if not all of them, come May. What does that mean when you have, I don't know, 4 million, 8 million, 17 million of those people start to need to procure a job that has full benefits? Will that change the supply and demand factor on the wage side? Or will companies at that point say, I'm not interested in hiring as much as I was a year ago? These are some of the uncertainties. So I know it's you're like, but I asked you about inflation. Yes, inflation matters, but our focus and attention is way more on these other factors, because I think these are the factors that will matter ultimately to the profits and to that labor payroll piece, which probably matters more at this point to the Fed's policies.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Now, talking about the profitability of businesses, what are your thoughts about an earnings recession? Do you think we're going to experience that 2 quarters back to back of declining earnings year over year?
I think yes, I think it's entirely possible that we're going to see disappointments, around the corner. I think it takes a while to kind of undo some of those accruals, along the way. Even like bonus accruals, it's not uncommon for bonus payments to be accrued for on a semi-annual basis for all sorts of optimism and what have you. So if demand starts to slow and you realize that, wait, hey, we don't have to pay people a substantial bonus anymore, it's lesser, well, you can kind of release some of that reserve a little bit, and then it softens that earnings hit, right? Because you're kind of releasing some of the accruals on just compensation alone, just for example. And so it's like a tender sort of role until all of a sudden it's that whole, was it Warren Buffett that said it, or he probably quoted someone else around, like, when the tide goes out, you can see, who isn't wearing swim shorts. It's the same in accrual accounting, right? At some point the tide goes out and there are no more reserves for you to kind of, but so I think we're in that zone right now where people are trying to figure out where the reserves that can be released in certain elements, because they are also uncertain. And it's okay. It's not a sinister thing. They're doing what we're doing. It's team uncertainty. They're trying to navigate and engage where is the demand going on in our business. So, whether it's the 17 million people who all of a sudden need to pay for health insurance, either privately or go find a job, or it's the 40 million people who have to repay on the student loans, or it's the small independent business owners who qualified for the emergency disaster loans, 90% of which, by the way, are sub 10 people employment firms. I mean, they're very small sort of firms. They're going to have to start repaying on their emergency disaster loans. All of these kind of come together for just a slowdown, we think, potentially this year. Absolutely. But here's what makes it a little complicated, though, Rosanna, because that would be an easy call, actually. That would be an easy call. If I got to make that call, and just that call, that would be easy. Here's what's really complicated. You ready for it?
Yes. Tell me.
Tax refund season actually might be robust.
Oh.
And that's counter to the narrative right now. We have already seen the first week in the books on tax refunds to the Treasury data. Now, granted, it is 1 week. You got 15 weeks to go. It's small numbers, small beans. So don't hold me to this. You ready for it?
Tell us.
It was up 48% tax refunds.
Oh, wow.
On that first week, on just that first week. Now, we don't know how many filings were in there. We'll hear from the IRS later about how many filings, but just looking at the aggregate refund data through the Treasury statement, week to week, it was up 48% in terms of the tax refunds. So we do believe strongly, actually, we have high degree conviction that we over withheld our taxes for last year. We do believe some people will have really unhappy tax season this year, but a lot of people are going to have possibly a reasonably good tax refund, is our current thesis we're rolling with. That can change when facts change. But will that fuel inflation a little bit longer? You know, like kind of into what could then be a slowdown.
Wow.
Oh,
So much uncertainty. Oh gosh.
So much uncertainty this
Oh
year.
wow.
Hardest year ever. Hardest year ever to call
Absolutely.
consumer behavior this
But
year.
based on our mentality, this is the most exciting year of them all. Right? We're gonna have a drink of champagne on New Year's 24.
This pattern recognition girl is gonna see her finally
Exactly.
meet her match, I think, this year.
I love it. I love the pattern recognition. I love that. So that's exciting. So higher for longer could be the case, and that's the camp I'm in. I think the market seems to be thinking, I guess the market thinks for itself, that we come down, and I think the Fed funds rate is going to be over 5. That's my opinion based on all these numbers. You know, you had a great quote on a tweet. Everyone should check out Neely on Twitter. She brings intellectualism to Twitter and raises the IQ of Twitter. Alvin Coolidge from 1923. Financial stability is the first requisite of sound government. Neely, do you have confidence in the Fed's monetary policies and what they're doing? And what would you do as Fed chairwoman?
Oh, wow. Okay. So here, I think I'm about to make 535 enemies.
That's okay. I love you enough for all of them.
That's awesome. Okay. There's a subtle point that Chair Powell has been making when offered opportunities to do so. And it first came on my radar screen last summer. But the quick answer to you is it isn't just about Fed monetary policy. It's about fiscal policy too.
Yes. I was going to say Congress and President, fiscal policies.
535 members of Congress have the ability to, you know, show their grit and critical thinking as well in this regard. And there was a very interesting exchange, which I won't be able to quote word for word, but I recommend anybody who's watching this, if you want to dig into it, it's in, you know, the public domain, you can find it. C-SPAN captures everything. But there was a really interesting exchange during testimony over this past summer, the summer of 22, where Congressman Kennedy had a back and forth with Chair Powell about really kind of getting at what the source of tackling inflation might be. And Powell said, you know, in his own, me paraphrasing his very careful worded way, he was like, yeah, no, it's not the full picture. You need fiscal policy just as much as you need monetary policy. I mean, he flat out admitted, you know, that it's a both and, not an either or. And then even fast forwarding to today, he made some similar comparable sort of commentary out of his statement even today. And I think it's an interesting perspective to me that and it's being, I think, grossly overlooked actually by the media, that they continue to be like wholly focused on the Fed and what the Fed's doing. And I understand why, you know, I understand money and banking and how these things work and what have you. But the fullest picture is both, both fiscal and monetary policy. That is how our system is worked. When you go back and you recast history, you know, even during that Volcker years, it eventually was tackled because of fiscal and monetary policy working together, not just one. I think there's been a lot of Burns versus Volcker talk. There have been enough fiscal and monetary talk, you know, of going back to that time frame and season. So we have a beautiful system of government. I am unashamedly patriotic, and I love America, and I will never bet against this country. But we cannot forget that it is multiple parties are involved in making the mess, and multiple parties are involved in fixing it.
Absolutely. And I love pointing fingers at each other, but they're all complicit there. Yes, I agree with you that, fiscal policies are equally as important with taxation and spending. So let me pass that question off to you. As the head of Congress or as the president, what would you do, Neely?
Wow, that's a really good one. I'm grateful that is not my job, to be candid. Um, so it's, I'm not one to armchair quarterback often in that role, other than to say, perhaps we need a better collaboration here and a collaborative effort. Well, this is an interesting one for me. I identify very much as a fiscal conservative,
Same here.
yeah, I do. And for a lot of studies and reasons for that reason. But I do think there's some elements where we probably need to amp up certain type of spending that would probably run askew from a traditional fiscal conservative. I do think that I would love to see more investment in our children under the age of 5 from both a federal level as well as not just a local property tax sort of driven level. I believe deeply in brain science and neuroscience, and there's a tremendous amount of brain activity that is created in children under the age of 5. And I think that their external stresses often can influence their ability to later have properly executive functioning skills and what have you, and why do I care about that? I mean, I care because they're children and they grow up to adults. But when we have robust and beautiful high executive functioning skills working, we make a really good labor force, right?
Yes.
It matters to the labor force. And so with corporate tax receipts at 7%, in total for the tax receipts of the nation, I'm not really a big fan of raising corporate taxes per se. I understand what's going to come from that, but are there other ways that we can have corporations think about how they could influence their future labor force, earlier on? So I think I have some unconventional ideas about what that might look like. None of them would gain traction in today's day and age and how it works in politics. It's certainly not electable to make some of these statements. But I also think we'll never see the salt cap tax repealed either.
Exactly. We were hit hard over here in New York and Long Island.
Yes.
Yes.
I understand I'm talking to a New Yorker when I make that statement, but
that was so important to us. That really changed our property values significantly. And then our property values have gone up since then because with COVID and everything, and we're actually still going up a little bit. And we just, I think, slowed down. A lot, that's according to Zillow. So we don't know what the buyer's gonna pay. It's a buyers and sellers make up the market. So, but according to Zillow, the price is up significantly still. But yeah, that salt tax, we were hoping it would get repealed, and nah, it's not going to be. And that really hurt us big time. For our taxes are insanely high. Are yours high in Minnesota?
They are weirdly high. Yeah, our state taxes are high. Our property taxes are high. We act as like a little socialist nation, basically, in the middle of the United States.
That's what we are. We're the ultimate socialist nation next to California.
We are, and it's funny. When I moved here, Rosanna, when I moved here from not a little socialist town, when I moved here, I was just stunned that people had these yard signs that they would just put in their yard. It wasn't a specific campaign or specific candidate, but it just said, happy to pay for a better Minnesota. And I remember just thinking, that is the oddest, choice to put on your front yard. Why you have signs that say happy to pay for a better Minnesota?
Oh
Again,
gosh.
it wasn't associated with any sort of campaign or candidate. But I will find myself when I walk on our beautifully recently paved, paths, and the snow is removed in 24 hours. I mean, I do occasionally go, I think I am happy to pay for Minnesota. So they do use their funds reasonably well here. I will say that. They're it's the Scandinavians in them, right? In their nature. They're very efficient and effective with their usage of funds, but they're high and they like to take them joyfully.
Yeah, well, at least you're getting somewhat of your money's worth. So you're enjoying less snow and paved roads. So our roads aren't as bumpy as well. So I guess I shouldn't complain, but we all complain. New Yorkers complain. So my neighbors and I all complain, and we're grieving our taxes, which we do every year. You're supposed to do every year, and we're always denied. And so we have to go that second process of court, and hopefully we're in the process right now. So hopefully they get reduced. But I feel like our house is like this is so high, maybe because it's newer, but I don't know. It's just too high. So I'm fiscally conservative.
Well, and same. Our property taxes went up pretty substantially as well. Tried to contest it, didn't work. Similar. I'm not married to an attorney, so I'd probably just cut the check and call it good. However, going back to CPI, what's one line that isn't in CPI? Property taxes. So we're going to have a situation that even though optically that people might feel like, oh, egg prices rolled over. It's not, up 60%. Now they're up 20%, or gasoline isn't up 50%. It's up only 10% this next summer, or something like that. Right. But property taxes aren't in that number. And so I think that's there are some phantom numbers that exist, or that are real numbers, but don't have actual effects in the CPI. And that's debated. I mean, some people were like, oh, it's kind of in the, owner's equivalent rent or whatever, but I'm like, it's not. Okay, it's not. It's not in there. Let me be very clear. It's not. So I think the consumer might feel like inflation still pinches them, even though Wall Street might be celebrating a different number. And that disconnect could be dangerous too.
Yes, absolutely, because it affects the consumer's bottom line and what they have available to pay. Like you said, they're going to probably cut back on consumption as these bills are due, and they're seeing that they're still having to pay all these bills. So, and this property tax, which keeps increasing, yet we're supposed to have a housing reduction near term at some point. I guess they say our housing prices are going to come down, and with the higher rates, and in our area, housing prices are still elevated. I mean, it hasn't really come down much. I know it's regional. Some regions, like the COVID hotbeds, Phoenix, Florida, I think Charlotte, North Carolina, those areas where people went to during COVID are seeing significant reductions in their home values. But areas like ours where people left, still highly elevated. So I don't know. Do you know anything about that? Do you look at the housing data as well?
Not as closely as many do. I mean, there's definitely people who are far more experts on that. Where our expertise tends to be is on the labor side. We really understand deeply the flows of consumers' capacity to spend by looking at various different consumer data, government data sources on that, how to read, how to take high frequency data sets out of the government and have derivative reads on the consumer's capacity to spend. Say that's where we spend. That's what our clients know us for, and can be helpful navigating that.
Great.
Like the tax refunds, that we just mentioned.
Absolutely. So, fascinating. I wonder if that money, if we get a significant tax return, if you get your money back, I wonder if they're going to put that in the market. And maybe people will invest, because everyone's talking about a Goldilocks effect for the first half of this year in the market. And there's going to be a divergence between, what the data is saying and what it's looking like is going to happen, and then what the market expects. And then if we get these people getting their money back from their taxes, maybe they're going to put it in the market. So we will get a rally, we'll continue running. And then at some point, reality can strike. So we'll have to see. Now,
we will see.
We'll see. And that's my next question, actually. But before that, I wanted to give you a little tidbit of information. Very interesting. This was like last year, was it? Yeah, it was like last spring. There's been, I think it's regional with labor. Since you're an expert in all this consumer behavior, I just want to tell you, with our business, every time we put an ad up, we use Indeed, we use a few of those services. We do it ourselves. We don't hire any third. That's another thing that we are. We're very hands-on, and whatever I can do myself, I try to keep in-house, and just to minimize expenses. That's that whole efficiency, streamlining. You notice businesses that would cut back on all their extra free lunches, or like extra bonuses, everything they do. Well, I don't cut back with my workers. That's important. I still give them their free lunches on Friday, and we do like certain things, but I cut back on other services. And that one of them is I find workers ourselves. My husband actually has a lot of joy in that, because he's like, it's an art. It's not really a science. It's like looking at the whole person and like asking them interesting questions. There's an awesome guy, Jim Simons. I actually met him once. He's amazing. Renaissance Technology. They live out here. And I know quite a few of the Renaissance people. Our kids went to school together in grade school. And I learned, that's who I like to watch and listen to. And I learn from these people. They're amazing leaders. They're catalyst leaders. And so he talks about surrounding himself with smart people, but also he talks about the whole what's going on in the labor force and everything. And I just want to go back to, we're getting an influx of workers all the time, more than ever. So last April, in the fall, and then just recently, we put up jobs. And of course, it could be for different type of workers. I know there's so many different types of workers, but in the packaging, also in the skilled labor force, and this is manufacturing, and also in sales, we've had more workers apply for work than like the past 10 years, as long as I can remember. So when I hear that businesses aren't, there's no workers applying for our area and for our business, we've had more workers than ever applying. It's interesting phenomena. Have you noticed that? Is it regional or is it different type of industries?
It's entirely possible that it's regional, for sure. Like that could be a possibility. I think even recently the Dallas Fed had made comments, they, in the Beige Book sort of commentary and surveys that they do, I think I had seen something recently that they had called out that it was hard for them to find workers because of, and this is an interesting statement, because of government transfer payments. And that at least this one particular owner had believed, that they were being disadvantaged because there were people who did not have the incentive to work, was the perception. I think it just depends on what income, sort of wage level you're at on that pay scale as well. I think I would imagine for packaging, it actually requires a little bit of skill, right? Beyond, with no shade at all, but like slinging drinks as a barista, right? Those are kind of two different elements of skill that might exist. I mean, I personally believe latte art is in fact worth the extra money when you get those beautiful like lattes
little
with the
trees
cool things.
and little hearts.
Yeah, exactly.
Love that.
Right. Like I'm a big fan of that, but I think they're just thinking kind of the standard sort of coffee shop area. But I think it depends on the job. I think it depends on the skills requirement. I think it depends on the region. That you could be seeing that. What's perplexing, I think, many people is that the job openings rate has been fairly high still. It's been elevated. It hasn't really come down as much as people had thought in what they call the JOLTS report out of the Bureau of Labor Statistics. There's some interesting theories as to why that might remain elevated. There's a theory that's running out there around, is it possible that you have some listings that are very stale, right? That people kind of keep the listings on because they, it costs money to list. So are you keeping some listings on, the remaining stale, or you kind of, you're using as like a hook to bring in and see like what you can get, what kind of fish you can get, right? For that bait. So is it really, or is it being a search tool, for talent? There's been a theory about that. There's been another theory about, are we seeing multiple listings for multiple locations, even though it might be one job? So if you have a single listing that's a remote work job, you might list it in different markets. Are they being double counted? Are they being single counted? The BLS, I think, claims that they're not being double counted, but there's some folks who believe that there's the possibility that they are in fact being double counted, in the measurement. But I think there's actually a third very plausible thesis to this, and that is the survey response rate for the JOLTS report has been down substantially. you have, I think the last I checked, the JOLTS survey response rate has been as low as like 30-ish%. It was as high in the 70% not too long ago. So I think just the quality of the data might be at risk as the number of respondents has gone down. So but it's one of those where, okay, it just adds to the uncertainty. Team uncertainty camp,
Exactly.
Rosanna. It
Oh
just
my
does.
gosh, there's so much data,
And we're
there's
back.
so much, yeah, and so much uncertainty. It adds to the excitement. So let's extract some clarity from all this economic data that we discussed today. How are you aligning yourself with your decision-making for your business, yourself, your family, investing? What are you doing based on all this, if you don't mind sharing?
No, I don't. We are still largely in cash. We
I
have
love
not
it.
we have not pulled the trigger to go, chips all in
Mhm.
on the market or in non-market related investments at this point in time.
Mhm.
We bought real estate very advantageously after the GFC, which
Mm.
I think a lot of people forget that it took several years to bottom out
Yes.
pricing. And so, I simply stated, I have the patience of a submarine captain. I have, I mean,
I love it.
I do, because I really don't have FOMO when it comes to the market, nor do I have FOMO when it comes to certain cycles. It doesn't, I think my joy is stored up in other areas of my life, right? That if I missed a quick the bottom, I'm not, it doesn't rule my emotions. Or if I miss the top, it doesn't rule my emotions. And I think coming out of the sell side, being a sell side analyst and having seen, peaks and valleys and missing things, I'm conditioned into a scar tissue that I think is different, understandably, than perhaps the standard kind of retail investor. And I care ultimately about cash flow. So, I sleep
Love
better
it.
at night. I sleep
Mhm.
better at night in uncertainty when I'm in cash. Now, am I looking to scale back in? I am. And I think scaling in is the way to go
That's what
when
I
you get
do.
back.
Mhm.
Yeah, when you get back into the market. And I typically will scale in over a 3 to 4 month period
Mhm.
when I do
Same.
that,
Same.
and just get comfortable with that thesis.
I
But
love it.
that's where we're at. Both of our market and our non-market assets, cash is just better right now.
So what do you need to see before you start scaling in? What are
It's
you
a
looking
really,
for?
for me personally, I really want to see us digest the student loan forbearance.
Hmm.
I think it's a substantial risk to the economy.
Hmm.
2/3 of our economy is driven by consumption. And while the consumer might have the dollars to pay, you had about 26 million people file for forgiveness. You're going to have 26 million people
Wow.
very upset if they have to go back into repayment, even if the Biden-Harris administration is able to create a program where perhaps even the repayment is lower through some, let's just say they were able to figure out some sort of income repayment plan that's lower. There were 26 million people who thought it was going to be zero.
Wow.
And so that's the number one thing. If I had to choose one thing, one item, one season, one moment this year, I candidly want to digest that. And I really don't think the market has fully digested that.
Great point. Love it. Well, it'll definitely affect the liquidity going forward, for sure. What are the dates for that? Is it this year or will it go into next year as well?
The timeline is Supreme Court of the United States is listening to the case
Mm-hmm.
to declare either the lower court The lower court had actually ruled that loan forgiveness, essentially, I won't get into technicalities, but loan forgiveness was unconstitutional.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah. And so it now went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court will determine whether or not the lower court was accurate on this or not, is my understanding by watching some constitutional experts on this. The Supreme Court, this is an emergency hearing. It's technically, it wasn't originally kind of in the normal course of docket. I mean, I think off the top of my head, the Supreme Court might have 8,000 requests per year, if not more, to have cases heard. I think they might listen to like 100 of them. You know, it's, that's kind of the normal course of auditioning for their time and attention. But this one was done through an emergency request. That is being listened to. I believe they've heard some arguments, I think, but I think they're weighing in on it at the end of this month of February. It's my understanding that they will give their decision in June, possibly July, but June, I think, is what most people are estimating. They have stated that there will be a 60-day period of grace after their decision for whatever the decision is made. So if you do that math, you're kind of looking in that August sort of repayment timeframe. But here's the kicker. Here's what I don't know. Here's like we always think about like,
give us
what
the
do you know
kicker.
because this, here's the kicker. Here's like, we always think about this in our business with data, right? We always sort it out. What do you know because it's super factual and everyone can kind of agree on it? What do you believe because you've invested the time to really understand it, even if other people disagree with it? And what do you not yet know? Like you should always be left with like, what do you not yet know? Here's one thing that we don't know. Will the payment processors who have so longed to participate in the repayment of these loans, even though the due date of that payment may not be until, let's just say, August 1st, hypothetically, will they send out notices in as early as July?
Gosh, you are an econ nerd.
So
you think about all these things. Wow.
And will the notices alone, right, cause people to be, you know, like, will the announcement cause the pullback in June? Will the loan notices, you know, in July be the reason that people pull back? I don't think you wait till the payment. So that's, we're hoping for clarity in this.
Yes. Will that incite fear or anger, like those emotions that you said, that causes people to cut back on consumption? So
26 million people will very likely be disappointed, if not all 40.
Yes, and that could be angry as well. Great points. And that's key. It's second order consequences, third order. It's always, and that's being an economist. You always have to think, and you know, being a chess family, we think in trees. And you think of if this happens and there's these other scenarios here, and then you think here and you go, and it's important with making decisions and business planning and strategic planning to always think ahead. And I love that you mentioned that most people just goes right over their head. They're just like, oh, this and this. So I love that. Now, scaling in is exactly what I do. I love it. I do it over the course of 3 to 6 months, sometimes, usually 3-4 months. And then I also scale out. What are you looking at? What is your style? I'd like to know, what is Neely like? Are you a growth investor? Are you a dividends person? Do you diversify different asset classes? What do you like? What kind of shopper are you?
You know, he's as many licenses as I have once held, none of them are active anymore. I still actually have professional advisement. So I would not operate on myself, even though I am legally allowed to. I do actually have professional advisement in our money. So, but timing it, we have the ability to kind of influence, you know, that timeline. You know, it's a former coworker of mine who actually manages our money, and so our relationship goes deep and it goes long, right? And so we like to talk shop about these things, but when it comes to the specific investments, we rely actually on him to make those choices.
Very nice. Leave it up to a professional. I agree completely.
Indeed.
Thank you so much for that. So What are your plans for the future? Looking forward, anything exciting planned ahead with Distill or anything else?
We have a really good, robust and building pipeline for client work already for the spring. So we're excited about that.
Awesome.
We are in the process of looking at other potential investments directly where we can help and come along and help advise small businesses. We think that those are always interesting, and they will very likely be more opportunistic too, right around the corner. I think we're going to see more of those, whether it's the baby boomers who don't have children, who want to take on the businesses and they're looking for exits, or you have other perhaps millennial or Gen X owned businesses, and perhaps this is an opportunity for them to improve some of the rigor and support that they need on professional management. So I have a business partner. This is not a one-woman shop. I mean, you have a business partner too, right? And my business partner happens to be extremely gifted at project management sort of mindset. She understands how to deliver exactly what she says she's going to do. And she's nearly a forensic accountant, so she's very, very good when it comes to the accountancy sort of component of our job. She's a CFA, she's a financial mind, and a total joy to work with. So I stand here in the grace that she allows me to also own our business together, because she's the one who actually operates. I mean, I am CEO in title, but I will tell you, she is actually the lady running the show in many, many ways, if not all.
Oh, you are see, once again, Neely, so humble. You are so gifted.
It's true,
and I'm sure she probably says the same thing about you. Okay.
No, she would, if she were here right now, she'd say, yes, that's true.
Okay.
And she would be 100% accurate in saying that.
But you guys are a great team.
We are a good team. We've worked together for about 12 years now. And there's value and merit to that. I truly believe we have been able to be successful as, leaving a corporate environment and doing our own business, because we did it in partnership, and truly.
Absolutely. I agree.
It wasn't not by
My
ourselves.
husband and I are partners for many of our businesses, and except for this one, Rosho is mine, as well as my investment and my advising that I do. I don't do advising like you. You're amazing, different level. I'm entrepreneurship advising with all the whole business side of it, different. Okay, I got to ask you, you have another position at your company called Chief Whiteboard Artist. What exactly does that entail?
A really big whiteboard and a lot of whiteboard markers. I'm a very animated visual thinker and describer of things. Words fail me when my pattern recognition is going haywire and I want to explain myself, so I have to draw. And I am not artistic at all. However, I like to explain myself by getting on the whiteboard. And everybody's happier when that happens.
Good. I love it.
So,
I'm very visual as well. I tend to have almost like I don't want it sounds a photographic memory, but it's not really like that. I see images that I read, like when I remember something, I memorize it. I actually see how it was written down, right? So I actually see it. So I take like pictures in my mind of images, right? I'm just so visual. I'm so visual that I'm not audio. That it's, oh my gosh, I'll try to listen to like podcasts and stuff on my headphones, and I'm like, I miss that. I have to like actively listen. I have like almost like a problem. My husband, on the other hand, is such a good listener. He'll have stuff talking in the background, and he'll have noise, and he gets everything. I am like, I don't hear anything. So I'm just so visual. It's unbelievable. And so, and it's like, there's a great science called mind mapping. You probably heard of it. And Lana Israel, her with Tony Buzan, I grew up in Florida, actually. So I actually met her.
Wait a second. I was born in Florida.
Where?
Are we actually twins?
Oh my God, we're in Florida.
Naples.
Oh my God, me too. I was in Naples when I was a kid. I went to I was in Park Shore, Vanderbilt Beach, you know, that whole area.
Did we go to school together?
I went to
This is
Naples. I went to Naples Christian Academy for a little bit. What?
Our teacher.
I was there in second grade. She was a nice lady. She was a lady. She had brown hair, short hair. Mrs. Ferrara. Ferrara, I think.
I think we were in school together.
That's so funny. Oh my God, Mrs. Ferrara. Too bad I don't have that yearbook anymore. Oh my God, I had a birthday party and I had everyone come to my house for a birthday party in February. Of course.
Did you have rainbow cupcakes?
Probably. That was my favorite. Oh my gosh. I love rainbow everything.
I'm not going to sleep tonight till we get answers here. I'm not going to sleep tonight.
We're not going to get answers. Oh my gosh. That's so funny.
Don't forget. You and I are the same age, same grade.
We are same grade. Oh my God. When did you skip? 7th grade?
Well, we left, this is so crazy. Naples Christian.
That's where I went.
This is so crazy. Like I have such vivid memories of like the orange Tropicana frozen treats out in the vending machine. Do you remember that? No. It was
maybe.
Okay.
I remember we used to do math right before lunch. And I remember I was always so hungry when we did math. It was this book. It was this book we had to do it in.
How crazy it is.
It is Naples Christian Academy. Oh
like,
my God.
I'm not well right now. Like this.
I knew you from somewhere. I felt like we were connected. This is so
no
crazy.
wonder we're so good in math. We had the same teachers.
Yeah. Oh my God, I know exactly. I remember that. We were doing, it was lunch. It was right before lunch. We would do math. And it was from a book. Word. And I remember I was always starving. But because they would do it right before lunch. And then there was like a little cart that would come around with the food. I would always get cheeseburgers. You remember that?
I'm blown away right now.
Right? Isn't it amazing? Oh my God, we met up again. This is so cool. I love it. I knew there was something special.
I'm flying to New York now.
You have to. I'm gonna give you a big hug.
Exactly.
You're an old friend. No matter what, we were definitely look, you were there in second grade, you were in my class. In our class.
I had to have been.
There's only one class. It was small. So you met a second grade classmate.
On Twitter.
I love that we can connect. Like it's so cool. It opens doors. Like you can connect to people that you never would have. It's so cool. I met my husband online, you know that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah. 98. I was in Gainesville. I was in business school. And
like that's when online was born.
Yes.
He was doing this podcast. I just didn't know how much my soul was looking for.
Your soul was looking for me too. I was like, I have to get this girl. Like I have to see her again. And we're going to meet in person too. Soon. She's coming to visit me here in New York and she's going to stay with me. She's an old second grade friend. I love it. You're awesome, Neely.
You know, Elon Musk, thank you for saving Twitter.
Exactly. I love it. I actually do love him. I think he's great.
I do too.
He's so brilliant. He's amazing.
Yes.
Let him be a little crazy. It's okay. Craziness comes with brilliance.
It's true.
It's true. We're crazy too. I'll take it. So you were telling us about Distill, which I love. I love hearing about all these amazing things you're doing, which leads me to my last question is, please tell us about how people can stay in touch with you and tell us about your services. I know you're a CEO advisor and just tell us how people can reach you.
Thank you, Rosanna. very reachable. With a name like Neely Tamminga, you can't hide. You can Google that thing and it will pop up all sorts of contact information. I'm very reachable on LinkedIn, Twitter. I don't have anonymous accounts. I am who I am. You can,
Yeah,
you
same
can
way.
find me. You can go to distilladvisory.com and you will see our emails there. Very, very, very reachable. No one has said that they haven't been able to reach us. The reason why someone might want to call us is if they have, a leadership team meeting around the corner and they're looking for some kind of creative ideation with framework setting around what's going on with consumer behavior and the economy. Those are very frequent requests that we get. We do that. Keynote speaking is another thing that we do very commonly, at events to kind of help ground people in a way that's very engaging. I think my favorite compliment to this date is one of the meeting coordinator people has said, not one person looked at their cell phone during your whole speech. And I'm like, there you go. Okay, that's
awesome.
Mission accomplished.
Engaged.
So we're fairly engaging keynote speaker on the economy, and we do special projects as well for folks who are looking for very specific kind of tactical ways of approaching consumer behavior with very specific economic data sets. We know where the bodies are buried in economic data, and we know how to ground better decision making, with better data. And that's there's all different ways that we engage with people, but it's usually some sort of confusion around consumer behavior and wanting some level setting about what that might be. That's why people call us, and we do it in a way that truly builds trust in the room, because we don't actually have all the answers. We believe that the best answers sit in the room, but it's our job to help unlock those ideas and be there to kind of help capture them along the way with the team. And, it's a joy. It truly is a joy to serve in that way.
Your passion is unmatched. And I can see how much you love what you do. So distilladvisory.com. And I love decision making. I always say your life is a summation of your decisions. So if you optimize your decision making, you can transform your life. Same thing goes for your business. Having the right data and asking the right questions is key in making better decisions. So thank you so much, Neely, old friend from second grade, and amazing, brilliant mind that you are. So humble and so amazing. And thank you. And thank you all for listening as well. We're so grateful.
Rosanna, thank you so much for inviting me on and making me smile and laugh and think. Just you are just,
and rainbow cupcakes.
You are sunshine and joy. And I truly believe that I am a more complete person because of our conversations that we have both online and offline. So thank you for adding to my joy and what you're doing here. Absolutely. Right back at you. This is, we're better together than we are apart.
Absolutely. So. Absolutely. Now, Neely and I are going to exchange cell phones and more after the show's over. So thank you so much for joining us. And we wish you all the best. Have a happy, wonderful day. Until next time, take care.